This training video will provide you with a complete overview of how we process documents at Godfrey Johnson. Our system uses a customized SharePoint structure. You'll be learning more and more about that as time goes on, but this video will provide you with an overview of the entire system. You'll be learning how to operate in what we call the paperless cloud. Many advantages to doing that. Yesteryear, we carried notebooks to and from hearings, depositions, and trials, and in the off chance we might need everything in the file, sometimes we carried stacks of boxes on dollies. This was miserable, and it didn't allow us to get much work done when we were away from the office. So we did away with that system and replaced it with what we have now. Today, an attorney or paralegal in our office with a notebook, computer, or an iPad can access virtually every single document we have in the office. As I mentioned earlier, we use Microsoft SharePoint, which is one of many products that are bundled by Microsoft into its cloud-based applications. Those, as a group, are called Office 365. No doubt you're familiar with Word and Excel and PowerPoint, although we use the Apple version of that, which is called Keynote, and that's how most of your training videos are made. We take all of our notes now on OneNote instead of on paper. We take all of our notes on OneNote because by doing that, we avoid the need to scan notes into the folder, and they're automatically available for everyone else working on the case. Microsoft OneDrive is simply a cloud storage system similar to Box, Dropbox, G Drive, or Apple's iCloud. Lastly, there's SharePoint. What is SharePoint? Well, very simply put, it's a cloud-based document management and sharing platform that allows us to collaborate with one another in caring for documents, creating documents, and sharing documents. We use this to store, process, and share virtually everything in our cases. There are many advantages to using SharePoint. Some of those are listed here. We don't need to go into them right now, but suffice it to say that our SharePoint cloud-based system is vastly superior to anything else we've researched when we selected what platform we wanted to use. One of the great advantages of Microsoft SharePoint is its enhanced security. It's much harder to hack into Microsoft's cloud servers than it is into an on-premises server maintained by a small business. The SharePoint hierarchy consists basically of different levels. Within an account, a SharePoint account, there may be many site collections. Within each site collection, there may be one or more sites. Within each site, there will be two kinds of things: libraries and lists. Lists contain items, they work like spreadsheets. Libraries are like storage locations. Libraries and lists will have individual items, such as documents, PDFs, videos, photographs, and so on. So at the site collection level, you could think of that as a form of intranet. Individual sites would be such as case 1, case 2, case 3, and so on. And then within case 1, you'll see libraries and lists. We have a library called Drafts, a library called Court, and a library called Privilege, and many other libraries in each one of our case sites. Each of our libraries then will contain an item such as a draft brief, an answer filed with the court, or a privileged letter. These are just examples. What matters now is simply that you remember each case site contains several libraries. Those libraries and lists are mapped as follows. We've broken them into three broad categories: communication, internal work, and court. In the written procedure that accompanies these videos you're watching now, you'll be able to click on each one of these libraries and lists, and it will open up and provide you with an exact definition of what goes into that library or list. The security issues that we are most concerned with on SharePoint have to do with setting permissions and determining in advance who is authorized to access various portions of a site and what they can do once they've done that, such as downloading versus viewing only, editing, or not being able to change the document. Those are settings you'll learn how to set later. What you need to know now is that permission levels are inherited from each item above it in the hierarchy you saw earlier, unless it's individually set at its own level. That is called inheritance. So for example, at Godfrey Johnson, our permissions are set as follows. At the site level, all Gojo personnel have access to read and write every site in the office. For individual lists and libraries, we'll extend permission to clients and opposing counsel, and individuals such as outside expert witnesses or others may have access to specific folders or specific documents or items. Those can be shared instantly from SharePoint, and the method to do that is very easy, but you need to be aware of what the permissions settings are whenever you share information with outside personnel. One of the big questions lawyers have when they look at large files is, what's in this file and what do I do with it? The advantage of our document management system as it's been designed in this firm is that you'll be able to answer those questions much more readily than you would if you were using large paper files. In the old days, if you had paper files, you might create a separate subfile for each type of material you have. Is simply a form of sorting. There are many ways to automate that process in SharePoint. When you see what those are, you'll be glad you're not in a paper office environment any longer. When you look at documents, you might sometimes tag them or annotate them or highlight them. And if you're using paper, that work is only available to you if you have the paper with you. More importantly, if you have to search for a specific name or phrase, unless you've already marked every instance of that in a paper file, you'd never be able to locate it without rereading virtually every sheet of paper in your file. With an electronic system, you can simply do a digital search and immediately see all the documents that meet your search criteria. This is what it would have looked like in the old days if you were going to annotate documents with markers and stickies and pens. But in the digital world, you do it on screen. This can be done most efficiently with an iPad, but it's also very easy to do in Adobe Acrobat. Other training videos will show you exactly how to do that and how to make it quick and easy. Lastly, we have the capability of applying what's called BI or business intelligence applications to large document repositories. This is very expensive and we don't use it every time, but in a case involving tens of millions of documents and tens of millions of dollars, this kind of technology can be a godsend because the artificially intelligent system looks for patterns, looks for trends, looks for names, and spots issues. So that forms an electronic triage that can put you somewhat ahead when it comes to document analysis in very large files. This process, by the way, is called data mining. One of the things you'll hear a lot about is the term metadata. Metadata sounds complex, but it's not. It simply refers to categories of information that are attached to an electronic file, such as a PDF or a Word document or a PowerPoint. And when we look at lists of documents that all have the same metadata structure, we'll see those in column form typically. The metadata structure that is applied to a document or a library is referred to by Microsoft as a content type because that data structure is driven by the type of content that goes into the library or list. Let's take a look at the metadata structure in our filed library. The metadata structure for the filed library includes things like the document number, which we use in federal court, the title of the document, which is not the same as the file name. The file name might be 12345.pdf, but the title might be Answer to Complaint. The date filed, the party source, the document control number range associated for the pages within each individual document, whether or not that document's been filed, whether it's privileged, whether it's been redacted, whether it's sealed, whether, for example, if it's a motion, that motion is at issue or not, meaning it's fully briefed awaiting a judicial ruling, whether there's been a ruling, who the principally responsible attorney is, who the litigation support specialist is, whether there's been a notification transmitted automatically about that document, what the attachment links are, meaning things that are attached to the document contain their own metadata, including their links. Every document in SharePoint has a URL or a Uniform Resource Listing, which is a web address, so that you can immediately access a document you have access permissions for simply by putting the web address into the browser or clicking the link in the document or attached to a document. Lastly, we can apply enterprise keywords. These are made-up phrases or codes that you can use in sorting and tagging documents so that you can pull them up later. We'll teach you how to use those in a separate video. Documents that are linked to your document. This is the reverse of an attachment link. And then finally, if it's a disclosed document, we keep track of what the number of the supplemental disclosure was with which it was supplied to opposing counsel. That's called the parent document. So here you see the metadata for the filed library. Similarly, the records library has its own metadata structure. You can see that many of the items are the same, some are different, based on the specific needs of that library. But what you need to understand is that as you're filling metadata in for documents, you may reach a metadata field where you have a specific number of choices. So for example, in the records library, when you select the record type, you will have the choices shown here at right. You can add additional ones by writing them in, but these are the choices that are built into the template for the records library. The metadata for all of these libraries is visible here on this map, which is easily accessible on the Gojo Secure homepage, where you click on the bottom where it says Doc Flow. You'll see the document flow diagram we're about to discuss, but if you click Show Metadata in that image, it will take you to this map. This helps you keep track of what metadata exists in each of the key libraries you'll be using, as well as whose job it is to fill in that metadata. Everything shown in green is filled in by lawyers. The rest is filled in by litigation support specialists or paralegals. Much of this carries from one library to the next, so you don't have to fill in all of this in each library. Now we're going to talk to you about the flow of documents through the office. It may seem complex at first, but the key for you to remember is that it consists of 9 very easy steps. Once you know how to perform those steps, and you understand the flow, managing documents will become second nature to you here in the firm. So let's talk about that document flow. You need to know that in order to carry out each of the 9 primary steps on the document flow you're about to see, you have to know how to do certain operations and functions in SharePoint. So rather than cover those here, we've broken them out so that you can look at individual short videos to see what it is that you want to do. These are the existing short training videos that give you the nuts and bolts mechanics you'll need to carry out the steps in our overall flow. Be sure you understand each one of these 7 sets of operations. If you do, you will literally know everything you need to know about how to use SharePoint at Godfrey Johnson. So let's get right to the document flow. We start with records that come from clients and outside sources as opposed to records that come to us from other parties in the litigation, such as documents that have been served on us or filed with the court and then served on us. So with these outside records, we start by putting them into a local drive. We may have to scan them first, but once they're on a local drive, which means the LSS's desktop or a dedicated external machine that she reaches by screen sharing, then she will perform the first step in the process, which is to OCR and DCN those documents. This simply means that she's going to use Adobe Acrobat to turn a PDF, which is essentially just a picture of text, into actual searchable text. OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. The second thing she'll do at that stage in step 1 with Adobe Acrobat is she will apply document control numbers to every page. We'll tell you more about how to apply document control numbers as well as how to OCR in a separate video. Once the OCR and DCN stage is done, the LSS will then upload those new records into the records library for the case in question. That upload stage is a second operation, and it is sometimes accomplished by using an external program called ShareGate. We'll cover that with you live once you've gotten more familiar with this process. Once the upload is complete, the LSS then completes the third step, which is to add initial metadata. And if you look at the metadata map, which again you can spot instantly on the Gojo Secure homepage by clicking Doc Flow and then Show Metadata, you'll be able to see exactly what fields of metadata are being added by the LSS at that time. If you read the written procedure, you'll see that that's broken into 2 separate phases. There's bulk tagging, which means that each column has the same value for certain documents that have been added all at the same time, and they're filled in one time, and they propagate to the entire collection of documents for each column. The second aspect of that are elements of metadata that are unique or individual to that document. The litigation support specialist will simply look at each document one at a time and fill in those remaining fields. The vast majority of metadata associated with documents in every library is applied at this point in time by the LSS. When she's done with that process, she will do 2 things. She'll notify the attorney, either verbally or with an email, of the fact that there are new records in the records library, and she will then delegate a task to the principally responsible attorney on the file in daylight, so that the attorney who's using the GTD or Getting Things Done system can rely on his task list to know about the things he's supposed to get done. The deadline for completion of the attorney review, which is what is going to go into this daylight task, is usually the following day, although the attorney may take longer to get it done. Then the fourth step, of course, is performed by the attorney. He does what is called the attorney review, which means he's adding the metadata that was shown on the metadata map in the green box. That includes marking documents as privileged, documents as irrelevant, or relevant but not yet to be disclosed, as in federal court, as well as information about the privilege. One of the things that will happen at this stage is an attorney may decide that a document contains some privileged information and some relevant non-privileged information, so the document will be redacted and then produced. This simply means that the privileged part of a document is blacked out. And of course, we'll show you how to do that in a separate training video. At that stage, he will then create a task for the LSS to go on to stage 5, which is filtering and copying the documents that have now been marked both by the LSS and then later by the attorney into the pre-production records library. It's from here that documents are then modified for further disclosure to opposing counsel. That's accomplished by the LSS completing step 6. There are 5 more fields of metadata that will be added, usually in bulk at this stage, so it's a fast process. But when that last field, create log, is changed to yes, that will trigger an automatic workflow which will move documents from the PPR library into either the served library or the privileged library. And it will update the logs list, which is where we get our privilege log and our production log. The next step, step 7, is that the LSS will complete all the rest of the served metadata. There are a few more fields of metadata in the served library, and many of the fields of metadata that were in the records library are now stripped away automatically because they contain privileged work product. The opposing attorneys in a case have access to the entire served library, which is why that metadata is filtered. The next thing the LSS will do in step 8 is to serve an updated disclosure with an email link to the updated disclosure and an updated logs list. That updated disclosure and logs list are PDF items, and we'll show you how to create those in a separate video. Now, let's look at what happens when documents are served on us by other parties. We use the word served to mean served but not filed. And when we talk about filed documents, we mean documents that were filed and served. So both of those last two are served, but one of them is also filed. So when court filed documents come to us from the other side or are created internally, the LSS will complete the metadata for the filed library. Now this is the entire structure. You can get to this very quickly once you understand the process and the nuts and bolts that's shown in the other training videos. Sometimes you'll want to see this map in a hurry. An easy way to do that is to go to the Gojo Secure homepage and then click the bright green button at the bottom that says Doc Flow. One of the things that comes up occasionally is that we have failed to adequately coordinate and communicate the rules about how litigation support specialists and attorneys interact and share responsibilities. We occasionally have seen problems where the principally responsible attorney is going through life looking at the things that lawyers do, and the LSS is going through life looking at the things that LSSs do, but without a clear understanding of how the responsibilities are allocated between them, things can fall through the cracks. And that is very bad, because when things fall through the cracks, the client is allowed to fall through the cracks. And that is very, very bad. So this question is, how do we keep things from falling through the cracks? Well, first thing we do is we want to avoid the blame game. We just don't want to hear that it was this person's fault or that person's fault when these responsibilities are set by policy according to this procedure. So we target these responsibilities very specifically. Where do we target them? Well, you got that right. The buck stops with the PRA. The PRA supervises the LSS. There are overlapping responsibilities, but the responsibilities of the LSS fit within the lawyer's responsibilities. Let's take a closer look. Lawyers plan cases and execute the related tasks that come out of case planning. They're involved in document review and analysis. They're involved in legal research. They draft pleadings, motions, and letters. Lawyers take depositions. Lawyers go to court. Lawyers negotiate and enter into stipulations with opposing counsel. Lawyers have the primary job of keeping a client informed. Lawyers are involved in marketing. And lastly, lawyers manage LSS staff. Now let's look at the typical collection of responsibilities that litigation support specialists have. They're involved in scheduling, calendaring, communication and messaging, document processing, which includes adding metadata to the documents. They're involved in maintaining information in daylight. They may become involved in simple drafting of pleadings and documents as assigned, and then finally they'll perform other tasks that are specifically assigned to them. So this is the general breakdown of how we allocate responsibility in the firm. Let's compare the job of document processing, which is mostly an LSS function, to the job of document analysis. It's really important to understand the differences between these two because they are billed for in different fashions. Generally, what you see in red here, document review and analysis, is billable. Now, a portion of what the LSS does when she is adding metadata one document at a time, that process comprises document review and analysis, and it is billable. So, under the heading of document analysis, we're trying to answer this question, and there will be a separate training video for this, but other than just reading the documents, what's the attorney supposed to do with the documents? Well, hopefully the metadata structure will guide the attorney through a systematic, step-by-step thinking process, but that is on a superficial level. There is a deeper level of document analysis. It consists of many different criteria that are broken down into various categories. We explain these in depth in a separate training video called Document Analysis, and it has its own written procedure. So a lot of the original work that's done by the attorney under the heading of document analysis is done on documents that are in the served library. But we don't actually do anything in this library other than assign the metadata that the library calls for. If the attorney wants to do more work, such as adding additional fields of metadata, custom tagging, annotation, bookmarking, then those documents have to be copied from the served library to the working copies library, which no one has access to outside the firm. From there, a number of additional operations can be performed, including creating folders and subfolders, tagging the documents with additional metadata, highlighting the documents, bookmarking the documents, annotating them in typewritten searchable form or annotating them with handwriting, linking the documents to specially made outlines or lists in SharePoint, adding further links to the document, and then performing searches of the metadata and the annotations that have been added to those documents inside the working copies library. Be sure to watch our training video entitled Document Analysis. You'll learn how to think systematically through the process of analyzing documents so that you can make the best use of all the evidence in your case. Thank you for your attention to this training video. Now it's time for you to take a break and then very soon carefully read the written procedure on document management in SharePoint where you found this and other training videos. Also be sure to watch the individual nuts and bolts training videos, of which there are 7 at the time of this recording, contained within the document management procedure. Thank you very much.